Hello everyone, and welcome to End-to-End Business Agility and the Role of the Mainframe, the second of 4 panel discussions we're having here as part of the Information Week Virtual Summit, Mission Essentials for the Application Economy, which is being broadcast by UBM and sponsored by CA Technologies. I'm Lenny Liebman of Information Week, and I'm really enjoying being your host throughout today's very special event. I'm just going to take a moment now to explain to you how the interface to this event works. First, any slides we have will advance for you automatically throughout the event. You can also download a copy of those slides by clicking there below the media player. By the way, at this time we recommend that you please disable your pop-up blockers so you can use all the interactive features of the interface. You can also submit questions at any time by just typing them into the Q&A window. Don't wait until we open our Q&A session to get those questions in. If you hear anything at any time that any of our speakers say that you want to ask about or even challenge, please feel free to go ahead and do so. Finally, if you experience any technical problems, just type your question into that same Q&A text area, and we'll be glad to provide you with some one-on-one assistance. So now on to the presentation, End-to-End Business Agility and the Role of the Mainframe. We have 3 superb panelists who are immensely well-informed about how we can teach our mainframes to dance. They are Robert Stroud. Robert is Principal Analyst of Infrastructure and Operations at Forrester. Like everyone at Forrester these days, he's very much focused on helping us understand what it is we need to do in the age of the customer. So in Rob's case, that specifically means applying DevOps and continuous delivery principles to all of our platforms, including the mainframe, so that we can be more responsible to the market and even get ahead of it where we can through digital innovation. We also have with us Dana Boudreau, a Senior Director of Product Management at CA Technologies. So Dana directs the CA Technologies mainframe application development solution portfolio, including strategy and product direction for Endeavor and Intertest and FileMaster Plus and SimDump and Gen. He's deeply knowledgeable about both mainframe and distributed environments and came to CA after a 20-plus year career at IBM. It's also my honor to introduce Lowell Higley, Senior Principal Product Manager at CA Technologies. Now, Lowell manages multiple mainframe product suites for z/OS, ZVM, VSC, and Linux on Z systems, and he's focusing on delivering Agile Ops capabilities to enterprises that are seeking to both optimize the adaptability but also the efficiency of those platforms, as well as achieving sort of true single pane of glass management across all platforms. Okay, guys, ready for some fun?
You bet. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Great. So here's my first question for you, Rob. So why should I even bother trying to get more agile on my mainframe? I'm hearing a lot of talk about sort of this 2 separate spheres of IT where I allow the mainframe to kind of be what it is, non-agile and reliable, while all my agility comes from all my platforms. I take it you're not really endorsing that position.
Yeah, Lenny, that's a great comment there to start with. That people say that the mainframe is dead, it's dying, it's going away. And I remember starting in the early days of the PC, and we were told then the mainframe was going away. Yet it's still here, isn't it? And it's still dependent. The mainframe is running critical applications for most of the major enterprises through the world, including the top 10 of the top 10 insurance companies in the US. And digital transformation now has gone beyond DevOps of just the unicorns and startup apps, and gone to the point now where it involves mainframe systems. And we actually have to go and depend on that. Now, Kurt Bittner and I did a report recently on digital transformation needs mainframe DevOps. And one of the key findings we found there is that the mainframe plays a key role in this digital transformation that all enterprises have to go through to compete.
So therefore it's your position that it has to be agile if our business is going to be responsive the way the way we need it to be.
Absolutely. The mainframe has to start to be involved in that process. Applications today are dependent on the back-end mainframe to drive value. So one good example I can give is a large insurance company. And even though their applications are delivered maybe in modern forms like social and mobile and internet, at the back end it's the mainframe that's driving the power. Now what they've learnt there is by leveraging DevOps methodologies, they can go and take a process that is significantly faster. It's more cost effective and it drives value. And by doing smaller change, which is the key aspect of DevOps, smaller change means that there's less complexity and we can automate it and instrument it. And that's a key aspect of what we're looking for, this automation and instrumentation in controllable bite-sized chunks across our environment so that we can get velocity.
So it's not only doing change more frequently, it's breaking it down into the more immediate needs of the business. The business needs this now, let me give it just this now.
Well, we give it just this now, and the reality of it is we learn. User experience is a big part of this. And as we go and look at this capability of, we've designed some requirements, we see how it works in the end user. We see how it works. Does it drive business? Does it drive value? And if it does, then we can transition it and grow on that change. And if something we do doesn't work, it doesn't add customer value, we can then slow that process down. Traditionally on mainframes, we've been doing long, lengthy waterfall. And that long, lengthy waterfall gives you great requirements at the end of the process that were good 12 months ago.
Yeah, and the markets are moving too fast now. Dane, I'm going to ask you kind of the same thing. What do you say to people who are saying, I'm going to let this platform exist as it does and as it has, and I'm going to get all my agility on the front end, logic and presentation?
Well, I think there's two discussions we have been having. One is, does the mainframe have to go at exactly the same rate as distributed or mobile platforms? And then I think there's another discussion about, does the mainframe play, and does it need to play aggressively in time to market? Clearly, in my opinion, the mainframe is critical. The mainframe needs to improve speed to market, and the mainframe needs to automate, make things smaller. But I think there's also a realization that the mainframe's a different platform. It's been around a long time. Complexities are different there than they are in distributed. The tool set mix is different. Some of the interactions are different. So I think the reality is that the mainframe can run at a different speed than distributed projects and at a different speed than mobile projects and still be an active part in providing business solutions. So that's my point.
Yeah, so I think that's a realistic position, right? To go from quarterly drops to new code being promoted every 5 minutes is probably not necessarily the right ambition for the mainframe, but certainly to speed up and be more responsive and do smaller pieces does make sense.
Yeah. Going from 2 years to quarterly would be a big move.
Yeah. Lowell, I'm going to ask, I guess, the same question from the ops perspective. Does the mainframe need to be as adaptive as kind of our x86 hybrid clouds are in terms of suddenly responding to spike capacity and then dropping it down when our seasonal peak or our, we've stopped releasing the product?
Well, thanks, Len. I think it does need to be as flexible and as agile, right? So our business services are cross-platform. So we have more than the mainframe involved in a business service. So that business service could be made up of multiple components, a ledger, accounts payable system, right? So as we monitor those systems and look at them to make sure that they're up and running, as it crosses from one piece of platform architecture into another, we need to make sure that everything is still up and running. And the way we do that is by monitoring using the same tools and the same methodologies. We can't monitor, one in a silo and monitor another one or manage another one in another silo from a operations perspective.
Because our applications are increasingly sort of these N-tier applications that have to cross everything, yeah?
Correct, yes.
So Rob, let me ask you this. If we're accepting for a moment the proposition that we can be more agile, I'm going to assume, we're not talking about it yet, that it's going to take some investment, right? Whether it's tools or getting people to change how they think or whatever. Give us some motivation. What can do you have any, I think you have some research that can make some assertions that I can take to my boss and say, listen, if we invest in this, this is how it's going to benefit our company, and I'll pop that up, I think, for our attendees.
Yeah. So this is from the recent State of the DevOps report from Puppet Labs. It's an annual report that's delivered annually, of course, as they are, believe it or not. And this assessment was taken by a large number of practitioners worldwide. And there's some really interesting facts here. That high-performing organisations that have gone and documented their processes, changed their culture, invested in some tooling, they are delivering huge benefits. And it's not just faster velocity, delivering 200 times more quickly. It's the change rate lowers. The smaller change leads to less complexity. And the other value proposition in that is also they're automating the processes. So in automating the processes, they're taking the human element out. They're leveraging tools and technologies and process that allow them to go and document what that testing stage is like, what that automated deployment stage is, even what the automated backout process is if it's required. And I think this is a cool aspect in that the mean time to recover, which is becoming a new metric, means that you can recover more quickly. And one of the interesting things is that those long, large releases that we used to do are now split into smaller pieces, so you actually know where the problem is if you actually go to the stage of implementing with error. And I think these are the key things. And then the other thing that businesses love is this shorter lead time to deployment. You can see statistics here, 2,555 times faster. I mean, shorter lead times. I mean, that's what we want. The millennials today, for instance, who are using services, they don't want to wait. They want that service now. And the unicorns that we talk about, these up-and-coming startups, they're delivering faster. And every business needs to go faster. But at the same time, you can't be fast without quality and consistency. And this really interesting data, and I think it's something that we're seeing the high-performing organisations do as they get better and better at their process and their skills.
And I think one of the myths of DevOps and getting code out sooner is I think people use the term innovation a lot, as though everybody's cranking out code that gives them quote-unquote competitive advantage. I think the reality is that for every application feature that does that, there's 100 organizations that are playing catch-up, right? So really what it's about, a lot of times what you're responding to isn't the fact that you want to do something new. It's that your competitor came out with something last week, and you better achieve equity really, really fast.
Exactly. You're seeing your competitors move so quickly now that you need to be able to react. Now, you're not always leading. Right. Sometimes being a quick follower is a great thing, right? But this gives you the capability of doing that. So identifying the things that work, the changes that happen, and then go and put that through a process. And I think, it's really about that changing that cycle from, what we call ideation in the industry, or the idea coming in, to delivery. It's reducing that time slice and also identifying what are the right things we need. Now, we've been doing agile development for some time now on mainframe as well as development. It's the next step of taking agile from not just our development methodology, but also to the execution point as well.
Dana, I want to ask you, because you made an interesting point about maybe all platforms not moving at the same speed. Let's talk honestly about the obstacles, right? What are the challenges we face in increasing the agility on this platform?
That we could talk probably this whole panel about that. So maybe I'll try to make it as brief as I can.
Take a few of the top ones.
Take a few top ones, yeah. So I think key to DevOps in general is getting IT priorities in line with business priorities. I believe that if the enterprise aligns with IT, that the IT organization puts all the energy towards those things. And to your point, if those things are well defined and small enough in scope, or can be broken down in scope, you can force the whole project to focus on that. And there's tooling needed to help that, because most organizations are broad, multi-platform, multi-geography, and you need tools to collaborate and document and what have you. I think there's a complexity on the mainframe because applications have been around for a long time. Some of them weren't architected to be small modular. Some of them didn't even have the presentation logic separate from the business logic.
Right.
If you really go back in time. And that's a complexity that's hard to overcome, at least not quickly. And as to your point, with lack of investment on the mainframe over time, that become a problem.
I just want to ask you about complexity and not sort of architected to be modular. Sometimes also on the mainframe what we do is we actually had a certain kind of modularity because a lot of separate components were built. They just weren't necessarily documented as such, and the interrelationships between them are much more complex than we're used to in an ordinary distributed x86 environment. So
then coupled with that, with the fact that they've got a Unix side and a ZOS side and a batch side, and they're all these special processors, and
So
And the beat goes on.
Exactly. Yeah. So we won't have you go on and on too much about that. I think the thing is we're going to be realistic about the world we're working in. And Lowell, I want to ask you, that was sort of on the dev side. On the ops side, what do you see as some of just the obstacles that mainframe organizations face in terms of really being responsive to fluctuations in workload demand and the rollout of new code?
So from my observations, the big thing I'm seeing is just the way that IT organizations are structured. Mm-hmm. So historically, we've been structured in what we call silos, or what's called silos, right? So we have a team that does, mainframe operations, and they do, they have mainframe generalists that kind of look at, several panes of glass and kind of look at what's going on in the various places, network, storage, right? So they've all got all of these different tools that they're looking at. And then we have sub-teams, the specialists, the subject matter experts that are, looking at their specific, pane of glass, their specific tool, and they're not really talking amongst themselves or cross-talking. And that's just in the mainframe world. If you talk about cross-enterprise, it's even a bigger thing. So just the way that we're structured, right, as mainframe IT ops, that's probably the biggest complexity or the biggest challenge to being agile today.
Right, and I think being walled off, the mainframe operation being walled off for a while has sort of kept them from being infected with this agile fever that's so much a part of the mobile and Java and distributed world. You want to add something to that, or?
Yeah, it's one of the things, and I think Dana hit on a key point, and that is we've not been investing in the mainframe for a while. We've put it in the back room. It's been working. It's been functional. It's been great, reliable, all those good things, right? And what's happened is that one of the approaches we've seen, as Kurt and I did the research in the paper, is that people say, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Mm-hmm. But now we've reached a point where actually we need the mainframe's broken, we just don't know it yet.
Yeah. So that's what I want to ask you. That was going to be my next question, which is there some, I feel like it's the frog in the boiling water problem, right? Where if everybody knows that metaphor, is if you put a frog in water and it's cool and you turn it up slowly, you can cook the frog. If you drop him in boiling water, he says it's boiling, he jumps the hell out.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Unless you want some frog. Is there, do you find with organizations, a particular precipitating event or specific pressures that drive the urgency to management to, in fact, do this reinvestment?
Exactly, and that's one of the things you see in compelling event. Right now, we've started to see data where people want to actually, add new features and functions. They want to deliver web-based apps. Now, in the past, we've been doing a lot of that web-based and mobile-based development, and we've been isolating it from the mainframe. At the end of the day, it actually goes back and integrates into the mainframe. Mm-hmm. And you want to be able to transition the mainframe part of the application. It gives you scale, it gives you velocity in terms of transactions, and you have a sunk investment already, so you want to leverage it. So what we're starting to see now with things like, a lot of the mainframe developers retiring, we're now starting to see things like new user experiences on the mainframe that are both that experience is alluring and it's useful. Mm-hmm. And now we're starting to see an interest in coding in that environment. And that's one of the things that you've got to see there. Other aspects is, we need to align IT and the business. Dana already talked about that. We need to start delivering to what the business is. The business doesn't say static. I remember my good days of early in the business, and I was in banking, and you build an application, it was good for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now it's good for 10 minutes. Yeah. And it's a slight exaggeration there, but we're seeing that. We want to be mobile. We want to actually drive that. And we have to deliver these things. And the reality of it is that we have to deliver with velocity. The business and the user community expects it. And the final point to this is the end user, when we started doing mainframe, used to be, for instance, another person in our company.
Yes.
Today it's not.
Yes.
We're empowering the end users. We are empowering them. They are making the decisions. They are driving where we're going. And if our business doesn't deliver those types of capabilities, we will not be in business very long.
Yeah. Dane, I wanted to ask you, maybe you wanted to comment about CA's sort of own internal journey in doing this, so we have some sense of sort of how we can get started.
Sure, yeah. CA, like many of our clients and many of our users, started many years ago and was managing based on waterfall, long design schedules, delivery every 18 months, 2 years. You put out a feature, and a year and a half later, that feature either wasn't valuable or had a different value or wasn't as valuable as originally thought. And really long cycle and long time before you got any customer feedback. In NCA, we've gone from waterfall and invested a lot in moving the organization to Agile. And now we're actively moving to SAFe. A big thing SAFe brings us, Strategic Agile Framework for the Enterprise, is the alignment of the business priorities with IT at a solution level across the business, not just within each of the products. A big transition for us. So with that transition, we've seen deliveries go from 18 months, year and a half, to 2 months with customer involvement at a monthly point where we actually get feedback on prototypes. We've seen much better feedback in our customers, and we're actually improved customer satisfaction and customer interaction with that. We've improved our time that you talked about ideation. We've improved our time from an idea to actually starting coding by almost 100%, which makes a big deal. And part of that's breaking it down into smaller pieces and really focusing. So, yeah, we've had great success in our transformation to DevOps with NCA.
Yeah. So I think I want to go along the group, starting with you, Lowell, and talk about, so we have an attendee who is saying, yes, clearly we have to create a more agile environment on the mainframe. But between where I am now and the ideal state is quite a distance. How do I get started in the next sort of 90 days after this event if I've got mainframe agility fever? What are some things that you suggest as sort of starting points within the organization? What would you suggest, Lowell, first?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. So I've seen all kinds of transformations start within various organizations. So traditionally, like I said before, it's an us and them. It's mainframe and everybody else, right? So I think the biggest thing I've seen companies start to do that's been the most beneficial, the biggest thing that they can do, besides making that paradigm shift between us and them, is let's have just one team that's responsible for operations or monitoring, managing operations from a level 1 perspective, say. So you can have a team that covers of generalists that might understand that a mainframe is that black magic box behind that glass wall, but they may not know much more than that. But they know if the stoplight turns red on their dashboard, that hey, I need to pick up the phone and I need to call somebody. So whether it be a subject matter expert or a specialist or what have you. So that's the biggest change that I've seen in a couple of companies out there, particularly in the financial services industry, where they started to institute that level 1 general IT ops team with some sort of single pane of glass to look at everything, from anything from the Windows, print servers all the way into the back into with the CICS regions and mainframe applications and things like that.
Yeah, so I think you raise a good point, which is even putting it on a person's screen is a important first step in eliminating the territoriality or the siloality that you talked about, which is sort of a primary obstacle because the division of labor, the silo, almost makes an implicit point that we can manage this platform differently, that it doesn't have to be like the other ones. So you're saying one place to start is even give level 1 ops team visibility into some mainframe KPI or alarming on their desktop.
Right, just those like 10 to 15, maybe even 20 metrics of most value around things like address spaces or zip and CPU usage, maybe some storage metrics, just the basics, right? And if they need any more than that, you still have your specialist team on the mainframe side that can pull up their tool and say, okay, I know where the problem is. Thank you, Mr. Generalist, for informing me of the problem.
Right.
And they can go off and do more important things.
Absolutely, but I just think that's very interesting from an ops perspective. It's a great place to start as a first step because we haven't done that for a long time.
Right.
Dana, I'm going to ask you the same thing. What do you see as a starting point in this process, way before I get to ideal state? What actions would you suggest some attendees take in the next 90 days or so?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it. If I was a project leader or a first-line manager in development, or I was an architect, what have you, how would I get started? Naturally in the process, there's a retrospective at each stage. It's a natural point to stop and reflect on what worked, what didn't work, what could I improve. And at a lower level, I think that's a great place to start. At a higher level, you're looking at higher level management or starting a bigger project. You look at the overall flow of your software development lifecycle and figure out where are my big bottlenecks. Where is it that I send it over the wall to the next stage and it sits there for 2 weeks just waiting for somebody to pick it up, as an example. And that normally is in a workshop kind of mode or kind of a high-level retrospective on the last projects we did.
So everybody should get a copy of the Phoenix Project to start off with? Or?
I think the Phoenix Project is a great book. It's an easy read, and it's quite thought-provoking.
Rob, I'm going to kind of ask you the same thing, because you've made an assertion, but again, those of us who are here attending, we need some practical steps. So any suggestions that you have?
We do need practical steps, and you've got to start the journey somewhere. So one of the things that we talk about, and there's been some good points brought up so far, is going through and looking at your process, as Dana referenced, and look at some value stream mapping. Just go and document your end-to-end process, get some Post-it notes and a glass wall and a pizza and whatever your drink of choice is, and start to document the processes you go through from ideation through to delivery. And one of the things you'll find in doing that is you'll find that there's some process you can pull out. There's some redundant steps. There's some steps you can automate. There's some steps you can transition. And this is one of the things we've seen. We've been doing a lot with end user organisations. And in this we find often there's steps that you can pull out that will actually go and save weeks in the process. Or you can do things like inform the operations team who are monitoring, of changes that are coming up well in advance, so they know. You're starting to build that inclusion, that oneness, and that's part of the culture aspect of DevOps, which the Phoenix Project actually does talk about, is bring that inclusion. The other aspect that you can do is we believe you should pick an area. You can't boil the mainframe ocean at once, and nor should you try. Back to waterfall if you do that.
Sure.
But you want to pick a project or an assignment or just a small piece of an application where you maybe have had some failures, you've had some high-level errors or transitions. And start with that. Make that within your scope and bring the team culture in. You really want to start to put all the team together, have them as one, as our ops example, have the development organisation, the ops organisation, work together and transition roles. And I think that's a key area of starting. Start small, get success, and use success to drive success.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you had talked about like the top 10 insurance companies. So what I might do is limit scope to, let's say, the applications in my mainframe that support mobile claims applications or something, and just focus on making those features more agile first, if that's a pain point for the business? And
that's a good example. In fact, one person Kurt and I interviewed for the paper who's in that industry, they identified that by going and looking at the way that the mobile mainframe application interfaced with the client server or the web part, by transitioning that to an API-based culture, by just going and rewriting that piece of code so it was all calling an API, then they'd insulated the distributed part of the app, the mobile part of the app, from mainframe code changes. So straight away they could call the API, and that allowed the mainframe team to put changes into the API that could then be called as at will by the distributed piece of the business, allowing the pieces to transition at different times, and of course add new features, and they could push back end in. And then that's part of what they did. It took a couple of weeks to put that together, and a bit of testing and rolling it out. But then the value to the whole organisation was that changes then to the mobile part of the app, instead of taking weeks or months, took days. So they could, change that distributed part.
So again, they focused on a very specific constraint in the system to, again, use sort of a bit of Phoenix language there. So Dana, I'm going to ask you the same thing about getting started, but because you are a product person, I'm going to give you license if you think there's particular enabling technologies that you think are really important for starting this kind of initiative. Where do you think are the first set of sort of tool investments that organizations need to make so that they can start on this?
Yeah. So I wanted to reflect back on the decoupling conversation that you were saying, where the company had gone to an API economy, and they found that allowed the mobile organization to work through APIs, and it was a very effective thing. We were talking about technologies. By virtualizing the back-end services as part of your testing, you can actually build those mobile apps, test to virtualized services before the mainframe finishes. So going back to that bimodal IT debate we were having earlier, you can actually use tools to help the mobile team work at a different pace than the back end.
I think this is what Ashok was talking about in our first session, which is, in fact, to have those test environments available. And that'll do a whole lot of work right there.
Yeah. So another thing you brought up is the operating having a console that understands where their bottlenecks are and where they're going successful. Using Agile Central from CA to have a visibility of where the project is, what state things are in, help automate the process, and control quality gates is a key place to get started and get a visualization of what's going on.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that because we were talking about look for the constraints now. How do you find those unless you have some tool that provides you with some visibility?
And the key is to get that Agile Central integrated with back-end things like source code management, in our case, Endeavor. We've got a product, Application Lifecycle Conductor, that does that and integrates the front-end distributed kind of things with the back-end. And we've got some other solutions for testing and what have you that add to that full portfolio.
Lowell, I'm going to ask you the same thing, and again, you can actually talk about some tools, because we might as well, although we're talking about sort of strategy and management and processes, ultimately there's probably some kind of tooling that'll be useful. Is there anywhere that you think is in particular for somebody who's starting a place where they can invest?
Right. So, back to Rob mentioned earlier, mean time to resolution. Right. That's a very important metric that a lot of companies measure their failures and how to get back up and running quickly. So we found that companies that adopt certain tools or certain mindsets, that single pane of glass I keep talking about. Right. If you can adopt something like that. The main benefit of doing that is, lowering your MTTR, or lowering your mean time to resolution. And that's significant because it gets you back up and running with your customers a lot faster. They can use your products or your ATMs or what have you. And there are some tools out there that are tuned to do that. The CA has CA Unified Infrastructure Management, which is basically a cross-enterprise tool that allows you to monitor everything in your infrastructure, whether it be from a Cisco phone system all the way up to your mainframe and everything in between, right? So you've got all that stuff in a single pane of glass. We also have CA Cross-Enterprise APM, which does the same thing from an applications perspective. It has all that mainframe stuff side by side with the distributed stuff. So those are the two tools that we offer as part of our portfolio that would assist in that.
And the APM is, again, really important for N-tier multi-platform applications, because you really do need to see where the bottleneck is. And it doesn't always mean that the mainframe is actually the problem, right? Sometimes there's a bottleneck in the mainframe, and it's because of the way the distributed middleware is making a call to the database, but you at least have to sort of pinpoint the problem.
It helps you get rid of that finger pointing, right? That famous blame game.
Yeah. So, ready to do some Q&A? If you haven't submitted a question yet, please go ahead and do so, but we're going to take some questions from attendees. Let's see what I've got here. Oh, this is a good one. Rob, I'm going to direct this one to you. So we have been talking about kind of the generational shift in mainframe staffing. Is there a possibility that if I start to push on cultural change, I'm going to exacerbate that problem because some of my people who are more inculcated in a certain way of doing things might want to depart sooner rather than make major changes in their work lives 3 to 5 years before they retire.
Wow, tossed me under the bus already.
That's it.
That's good. So it's interesting. We've been speaking to a number of customers who are doing DevOps in the mainframe, and it's really interesting that many people who are in the mainframe love their old ISPF editor. You know, it's that green screen, and they're used to it, and they may even love JCL, job control language, although I don't particularly care for it. But the reality of it is that there's new modern tools coming now that you can actually leverage and use that give you graphical user interface, user experience. And we are seeing a new generation of mainframe programming staff come about, new generation of mainframe programming methods. And I think what we're going to do is, yeah, you may lose one or two of those key resources, and that may happen. But the reality of it is you've got to change the culture. And changing the culture is not always smooth. It's not always painless. And I think in a controlled manner, if you structure it the right way, start at the edges, find the people who want to transition, start with them. It's like all cultural change. You know, it's people who either come along for the ride or they may choose to take the ride somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay to say. I'm going to ask you, Dana, this next question here, which is my executives are not going to support new mainframe investment. They're convinced that our innovation funding should be allocated to cloud and mobile. How do we convince them to invest in some new tooling as well as the cultural disruption?
I liked his question better. I like your question better. You know, I heard this quote from a customer. 20% of the applications drive 80% of the revenue. Those 20% are running on the mainframe. What do you mean you're not going to invest in that 20%? I don't know how you can't invest in that 20% that's going to drive 80% of your revenue. And yes, I understand that a new front end makes you look really good, but on the back end, you've got to keep providing that financial information, those transactions you've expected.
I like the answer, even though you wanted me to ask somebody else the question. But I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a number. Also, what I like about that is you put a number in there, and I think a lot of times those numbers are very, very convincing. Lowell, the other question that I have here is about what you brought up, which is this idea of mainframe ops monitoring being really integrated in the rest of the hybrid cloud environment. Aren't the ops skills really so specialized that we can't really ever move past kind of the alert console thing? In other words, you described that as a first step, and we're being asked, okay, but does it ever go beyond that?
Okay. Good question. I like it.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you liked one of my questions.
So you'll get invited back.
We already have a lot of data that we're producing out of all of our tools, right? From our storage monitoring system, from our network monitoring system on down the line, including change management or the changes that are going into place from the DevOps system, right, or the DevOps process. So imagine, if you will, that we created some sort of, I don't know, analytics engine that could correlate some of that stuff and say, hey, you know what? Zips utilization just spiked, right? But the analytics engine looks at that and says, you know what? A change for this application just rolled into place 35 seconds before that. Maybe that analytics engine could kick off an automated rule and say, let's pull that change out. And let's go forward and make everything right again, right? So your MTTR, or your mean time to resolution, was seconds, right? And that could be operator-assisted, generalist-assisted. It could be automated, right? So a lot of companies get kind of nervous when you start talking about taking people out of the picture, particularly their subject matter experts.
Sure.
But maybe with the data we have available, there are certain things that we would allow them to do that could be automated without ever involving those subject matter experts.
Yeah. So when you're raising this, it's a little bit about sort of a performance issue. Well, I want to ask you another question, because as we discussed in the first session, the economics of the mainframe are very different. So we're trying to have agility, but we have this IBM software licensing model that we don't have on other platforms, right? where when my usage goes up, it increases my software costs across the board.
Right.
So my concern is I'm going to be adaptive to a business event and pay a lot of money for it. Now, generally speaking, the mainframe is very good when it comes to incremental costs because it's so efficient. We don't have to add bodies. But there's a particular idiosyncrasy about cost on the mainframe. Do you see, from an Agile Ops point of view, creating either any kind of policies or automation or anything else that helps me insulate the organization from the unanticipated, large, scary cost event?
Sure. So going back to that analytics engine I just talked about, that hypothetical analytics engine, we could use something like that and a correlation engine and a rule engine and all that stuff kind of thrown together in a nice, neat black box. And we can take things like that and create rules that, if your 4-hour rolling average, goes above a certain point, that maybe you wait a little while to kick off, batch jobs or certain types of workloads. Or maybe you shift those workloads to another LPAR that's not as occupied, right?
Yes.
So you can even out those kind of steep climbs in MIPS utilization, maybe across the systems, across the sysplex, in smart ways.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's interesting to really think about because, again, as we talked about in the first session, we may have to be more aggressive about cost because we're asking for more workloads. As we become more agile, we're asking for more stuff to happen, right? So we may have to be more aggressive with that. We're getting near the end of our time. What I would like to do is just kind of go down the line and give each of you 30 seconds or so of anything you want to either say in closing, emphasize again, a point you haven't made, and just open it up. So, Rob, is there anything at all that you want to say in general?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So it's clear that the mainframe is a core part of all key businesses, and we have to invest in the mainframe. And I think DevOps gives us the ability, and I like what Lowell just said in terms of balancing the workload. It gives us a cost-efficient and effective vehicle to use, and DevOps is going to give us a lot of benefits, and we should be looking to those benefits to drive out our efficiency, effectiveness, and quality. And do it in a way that allows us to be agile as well.
Dana, final word from you.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about integrating Agile Central and managing the end-to-end application development lifecycle through that. Also key is automation and automated testing and providing automated deployment to the test environments as well as being able to generate test data that's applicable to that particular test. A lot of mainframe customers take the database that's in production, take out the PII, and run a test again. They have no idea whether or not they're really testing the edge cases or whether they're going through terabytes of data doing the same thing over and over again. Big opportunity for improvement there. And CA's got a full suite of things that we can offer to customer set.
It sounds like while we're talking strategically in this session, that we're focusing on some real specific opportunities.
Yes.
I mean, the test data one being another one where, Robert, as you were saying, you can get a win and then show management, this investment paid off, so make the next investment.
Yes.
The whole same thing. I'm going to just ask you if you have any final thoughts you would like to share.
So I guess I'd like to hit again on the point that we're one team, one fight. We can't think of the mainframe and the distributed guys as us and them. We really are in this together. And as time goes, we're already seeing it, but as time goes forward, our business services are going to become more and more intertwined, and it's going to be harder to separate out, what's mainframe and what's not mainframe, at least from a business applications or a business services perspective. So I would encourage, companies out there, IT organizations, to kind of start tearing down those silo walls and talk and be part of the same team.
Yeah, I think it's a really great suggestion. It's what you kind of even talk about at the basic level with the monitoring screen. And I think it's also important to emphasize again the urgency of doing this, right? You may not experience a precipitating event, but the survival of our organizations in a time where agility is like the #1 attribute you need to have, it could be sort of fatal in a slow way, but actually not that slow the way markets are moving. So I appreciate everybody sharing their thoughts on this. And with that, we'll thank you for attending today's presentation. Again, end-to-end business agility and the role of the mainframe therein. This has been the second of 4 panel discussions we're having as part of this Information Week Virtual Summit. Mission Essentials for the Application Economy, broadcast by UBM and sponsored by CA Technologies. Now, up next, in just 30 minutes, will be a session on operational analytics that I think Lowell even hinted at. And I encourage you to attend that, especially if you're looking to up your mainframe management game as your workloads grow, as your budget tighten, as your veteran operational SMEs age out of the workplace. You'll really want to hear what we're sharing then. And as always, we invite you to make full use. There's a lot of resources here we've provided as part of this virtual event. There's engaging peer-to-peer chat. There's informative short videos. You can go to the kiosks and speak to some CA product subject matter experts if you're interested in any of the products you've heard about. Also, within the next 24 hours, you're going to receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Very helpful if you want to share this content with someone you report to or somebody who reports to you. It's also my solemn legal duty to inform you that this presentation is copyright 2016 by UBM. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that is the case, by Information Week and CA Technologies, and that our individual speakers today are solely responsible for their content and their extremely well-formed opinions. So on behalf of Rob and Dana and Lowell, thanks again for your time. I'm Lenny Liebman. Please join me in 30 minutes for our next panel discussion on operational analytics. See you then.